Coming up on Global Business, Chinese President Xi Jinping wraps up his visit to Russia with the signing of new agreements to step up strategic and economic partnership with Moscow. All eyes are on the U.S. Federal Reserve to see what course it takes on interest rates later today. And in our special series, Reporters Frontline, we discover how new economy businesses are thriving as China emerges from COVID-19. And welcome everyone to Global Business here on CGTN. I'm Michael Wong. Well, Chinese President Xi Jinping has concluded his three-day state visit to Russia. Senior Russian government officials have bid him farewell at the airport with a grand ceremony. Now, while in Moscow, President Xi Jinping and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin held talks at the Kremlin. The two leaders signed joint statements on their comprehensive strategic partnership of coordination and economic cooperation. Our Wang Haiyang has more.
Russian President Vladimir Putin welcomed Chinese President Xi Jinping in a ceremony at St. George Hall on Tuesday. The two leaders held talks, exchanging views on relations and major regional and international issues of mutual interest. President Xi Jinping said China-Russia relations go beyond the bilateral scope and are crucial to the world and the future of mankind. Xi spoke highly of relations, saying that to consolidate and develop long-term good neighborly and friendly ties with Russia confirms the historical logic and is China's strategic choice, which will not be affected by any turn of events. Xi said, no matter how the international situation changes, China will continue to promote the China-Russia comprehensive strategic partnership of coordination for a new era. The leaders also said the two sides should continue to cement people-to-people exchanges. Xi said China and Russia have deepened political mutual trust, converging interests, and people-to-people bonding, and have continued to advance cooperation in economy, trade, investment, energy, and cultural exchanges. Xi said China-Russia cooperation is covering more areas, building greater consensus, and delivering early harvests. He expressed his readiness to work with Putin to provide guidance and instructions for relations and practical cooperation to boost development and rejuvenation of both countries. The two leaders also highlighted their commitment to the settlement of the Ukraine crisis through peace talks. In a joint statement signed by Xi and Putin, the two nations stressed dialogue as a solution to the crisis and called for respect for the security concerns of all countries in resolving the conflict. Moscow expressed appreciation to Beijing for consistently upholding an objective and impartial position on the issue, and it reiterated its commitment to restarting peace talks as early as possible. After the talks, the two leaders signed and issued a joint statement on deepening the comprehensive strategic partnership of coordination for the new era, and a joint statement on the pre-2030 development plan on priorities in China-Russia economic cooperation. The two sides pledged to carry out economic cooperation in multiple key areas, including expanding the trade scale, optimizing the trade structure, and developing e-commerce and other innovative modes of cooperation, and vowed to improve financial cooperation, consolidate all-round energy partnership, promote exchanges in technology and innovation, and upgrade industrial cooperation. Wang Haiyang, CGTN.
So let's indeed take a closer look at that joint statement on the deepening of China's partnership with Russia. Now, the statement says China-Russia relations will steer clear of military or political alliance, as was the practice during the Cold War, but transcend such a model of state-to-state relations and have the nature of no alliance, no confrontation, and not targeting any third party. Both sides agree on staying committed to the United Nations-driven international structure and law-based world order and on opposing any form of unilateralism or bloc confrontation. Russia says it's willing to restart peace talks in its conflict with Ukraine, and both China and Russia agree that responsible dialogue is the best way toward a sustainable solution. On security, both sides pledged to work together more on regional and global security issues through mechanisms like the Global Security Initiative, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the BRICS Summit, and other multilateral meetings. China and Russia will step up cooperation in bilateral trade and investment, finance, energy, cross-border infrastructure, and food security. The agreement also covers people-to-people exchanges, climate actions, and other regional and global hotspot issues. Well, President Xi Jinping's visit to Moscow has helped strengthen relations between China and Russia, with both countries pledging to deepen economic ties. Our reporter Yang Chengxi breaks down some of the key takeaways from the visit.
Candid, friendly, and fruitful. These are the words used officially to describe the meetings between President Xi Jinping and President Vladimir Putin here in Moscow. The meetings were a major milestone for China and Russia. The relationship further solidified in two joint statements for strategic partnership and economic cooperation. Trade and investments are also prominent themes. Meetings between leaders usually provide impetus to top-level regulatory upgrades and optimization. Both sides have agreed to promote the drafting of a new version of the investment cooperation plan outline, and they have welcomed the launch of new negotiations for an investment agreement signed in 2006. These moves are expected to create a more fair, stable, transparent, and predictable business environment for investors. Other measures aim to expand the scale of trade. Let's break some of these down. First is developing e-commerce, where Chinese platforms have world-leading expertise. Now, when goods are bought and sold, logistics becomes the next big challenge. That's why the second measure sees both countries working to ensure convenient transportation through air, road, rail, waterways, and the sea. Now, thirdly, China and Russia will increase the use of local currency for trade, investments, and loans. This, experts say, can reduce the reliance on the American dollar for settlements, lower interest rate risks, and make trade more efficient.
These measures are interlinked, and together they are expected to optimize trade between the two countries. Sergei Sanakoev, the president of Asia Pacific Research Center in Moscow, said trade and investment between China and Russia have come a long way.
From the 1995, we begin our trade cooperation from the level less than $5 billion US. So you can imagine what kind of path we already passed. We have very good long-term contracts in energy, and we have new contracts and new cooperation in high technology, in agriculture, and in every spheres of the people's life.
He said the state visit has resulted in stronger ties between China and Russia and will benefit businesses and ordinary consumers in the future. Yang Chengxi, CGTN, Moscow.
And Chinese President Xi Jinping's visit to Russia has been well received by local officials and entrepreneurs. They believe the move will generate vast opportunities for economic and business cooperation between the two countries.
Russia's economy minister says the visit demonstrates bilateral relations are at an unprecedented level. In the meantime, he expressed confidence that the two countries' ambitious trade goal, which seemed a mission impossible just 3 years ago, is likely to become a reality this year, ahead of time.
The leaders of our two countries have set the goal of $200 billion in bilateral trade by 2024. It looked hard to realize 3 years ago, but we can achieve it this year ahead of time. Why are we so confident? First of all, our cooperation in the traditional energy sector forms the strong basis for cooperation in trade and investment. Russia and China also increasingly cooperate on goods supply and the industrial sector. Bilateral investment has reached $165 billion. Infrastructure that serves trade is also rapidly developing.
Russian entrepreneurs set up welcome signs outdoors to express their warm anticipation for the Chinese leader's visit. Trade growth will boost economic development. It is a win-win situation for both countries.
The Russian entrepreneur is also looking forward to increased business cooperation with his Chinese counterparts, which come in multiple ways.
China-made products are good in quality. This is widely acknowledged by Russian entrepreneurs. We businessmen can simply purchase more goods from China and resell them in Russia. We could also register and produce in China or purchase machines from China and produce in Russia with our own materials.
But Luzov also says the mutual trust between Chinese entrepreneurs and their Russian counterparts will push their cooperation to another level. 谢欣, Gao Songya, CGTN.
Is still to come here on Global Business. A tough balancing act between fighting inflation and maintaining financial stability as the global markets eye the U.S. Federal Reserve's latest rate decision in just a few hours' time. The global economy as we know it sits at a critical juncture. An uncertain world facing unprecedented challenges. In times like these, solidarity, cooperation, and ensuring development are paramount. For over 2 decades, leaders from across the region and around the world have gathered at the Boao Forum for Asia to discuss the most pressing issues of our time and forge partnerships. Join CGTN as we bring you the latest insights, interviews, and analysis from this year's event. Our special coverage begins on March 27th, only on CGTN. Well, the global spotlight is firmly on the U.S. Federal Reserve, which will conclude a 2-day meeting later on Wednesday. The Fed is expected to either pause or raise interest rates by 0.25 percentage point in a few hours' time. Now, the U.S. Fed, of course, has a tough balancing act ahead, where on the one hand it needs to battle still elevated inflation, but on the other hand maintain financial stability following 2 bank failures in 1 month. Now, since the Fed began tightening monetary policy in March of 2022, benchmark interest rates have risen by a total of 450 basis points, or 7 rate hikes so far. And for more on the Fed's upcoming rate decision, I want to bring in Qin Ruohan, Supervisor in Economics at the University of Cambridge. Ruohan, thank you for joining us on the program. First question, of course, is your expectations for the Fed's decision in a few hours' time. We have some analysts saying the Fed may completely pause when it comes to rate hikes, or maybe slow down the pace of rate hikes to 25 basis points. What do you think? Is there any chance that perhaps the Fed may continue with the 50 basis point rate hike? That seems very slim.
This question has certainly caught the attention of the entire world. So earlier this month, the Fed was expected to implement a 0.25 percentage point increase in interest rates from the current range of 4.5% to 4.75% as a measure to curb inflation resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic and the Ukraine war. However, after SVB buckled as interest rates rose, there is now a possibility that the Fed may sacrifice its inflationary targets and refrain from further monetary tightening for the sake of financial stability and the fear of more bank failures. But at this stage, it remains relatively uncertain whether the Fed would raise or pause. Markets suspect a 0.25 percentage point rise as most likely, with a slightly smaller chance of holding rates steady. I would, however, suspect it's more likely that it would pause or even end its series of interest rate hikes out of the fear for further contagion with more bank failures. The Federal Open Market Committee meeting is taking place as we speak, and decisions will be out in a couple of hours. We'll see.
Yeah, decision coming up in just under 5 hours' time now. As it stands right now, Ruohan, how do you think the Fed is prioritizing its thinking when it comes to decision making? You talked about sacrificing the fight against inflation, but inflation, of course, still elevated. Very important when it comes to the Fed's mandate. How do you balance that between inflation and financial stability? How difficult is that trade-off for the Fed?
Let's go back in time just slightly. So prior to the collapse of the Silicon Valley Bank, the Fed had a clear target of taming high inflation by aggressively raising interest rates. It was a common belief on Wall Street that the Fed would continue to increase interest rates until something breaks. Now that it broke SVB, the Fed is forced to balance between calming the turmoil in the banking sector and tackling inflation. Though there is mounting pressure on the Fed to prioritize financial stability over its monetary policy objectives, on the ground that the Fed's interest rate hikes are to blame for recent disruption in the banking sector. We have to also bear in mind that it is not the responsibility of the monetary policies to protect lenders' profits. So this is probably one of the most challenging decisions the Fed has to make since 2008, because they're facing the consequences of either a banking crisis or inflationary spiral. Having the public lose faith in either the banking system or the inflation targets can lead to a fiasco, because both can be self-fulfilling. It is treading on thin ice to play the two-handed economists, convincing the public that the central bank can still raise interest rates to tackle inflation on one hand, while being able to smooth disruption in the financial system on the other hand. I would say it's an extremely difficult trade-off that the Fed has to make.
So, Rohan, given the recent banking turmoil, how concerned should we be about more deposit withdrawal demands from U.S. regional and smaller lenders and the implications of that for U.S. financial stability? Could we see more banking turmoil in the U.S. ahead as depositors get jittery?
So for this specific fear that depositors were losing faith in the banks, leading to more bank runs and financial contagion, FDIC judged SVB too big to fail and guaranteed all the bank's deposits. If the sale of its assets does not cover the cost of the deposit bailouts, then all banks have to chip in to fund it. Also, the Fed is providing other banks with remarkably generous support. A new program stands ready to make loans secured against long-term treasuries and mortgage-backed securities, like those in which SVB had heavily invested. Typically, a central bank that provides loans require a reduction in the market value of the securities used as collateral. However, in this case, in contrast, the Fed is offering loans up to the full face value of the securities, which can be more than 50% higher than the market value for long-term bonds. This ensures banks with bond portfolios similar to SVB's will be able to acquire sufficient funding to meet demands of the depositors. So the outcome of this crisis largely comes down to the public confidence, the public perception. Under the current circumstances and policies, the belief is that deposits are safe and the banking system has massive liquidity support on offer. And therefore, the crisis is unlikely to further sabotage the broader financial system.
So you're saying then, Rohan, that U.S. financial regulators have indeed done enough to shore up confidence in the banking system, if I'm hearing you correctly, yeah?
Temporarily, yes, but for the long term, not really. So it is ironic that SVB's failure is not caused by its core business model of doing business with high risk and fast growing tech sectors, but instead from a maturity mismatch. The question is, how come SVB was able to take on such a risky interest rate maturity mismatch and had taken such enormous unhedged bets on low interest rates, which it failed? It is puzzling to understand why regulators would allow SVB to commit such a textbook banking error. The lesson to learn from SVB's failure is the oversight of the policymakers, meaning that the regulation of banks, which were large but not enormous, has been inadequate given the threat that posed to the economy. So long-term confidence can't be restored without remedy of oversight from policymakers. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I have a similar question for the San Francisco Federal Reserve as well. Rohan, many thanks for your thoughts on that. Chin Rohan, Supervisor in Economics at the University of Cambridge. Thank you. Well, the head of the European Central Bank has reiterated her pledge for price stability in the euro area. Speaking at a conference Wednesday at Frankfurt's Goethe University, ECB President Christine Lagarde vowed to bring inflation back to 2% over the medium term, stressing the goal is, quote, non-negotiable. She says the agency's monetary policy is starting to take effect. Lagarde also assured investors that the European banking sector is resilient with strong capital and liquidity positions. Ms. Lagarde added that the ECB will provide liquidity support if required.
For inflationary pressures to ease, it is important that our monetary policy works robustly in the restrictive direction. And that process is only starting to take effect now. While the European banking sector is resilient, with strong capital and liquidity position, in view of recent financial market volatility, we are ready to act and to provide liquidity support to the financial system if needed, and to preserve the smooth transmission of our monetary policy.
Meanwhile, global stocks were cautiously higher on Wednesday as hopes that a banking crisis would be averted were tempered by uncertainty. Data showing British inflation unexpectedly rising to 10.4% in February boosted expectations for a quarter-point rate hike at Thursday's Bank of England meeting, lifting sterling. While London's FTSE stock index dipped, European stock markets edged higher. Also, the worries from investors triggered huge safe haven demand for gold, which briefly broke above $2,000 per ounce and hit its one-year high this week. However, prices retreated after the rescue of Credit Suisse drove a tentative rebound in appetite for riskier assets. Well, Chinese Premier Li Qiang has pushed for stronger progress in China's manufacturing industry. He made the remarks at a symposium during his visit to central China's Hunan province. Premier Li stressed the need to advance high-quality development, focus on the real economy, and develop high-end manufacturing to form a modern industrial system. The Chinese premier also visited local enterprises and went into the workshops and laboratories to learn more about the production process. He stressed the importance of talent cultivation, technology innovation, and transformation of traditional manufacturing industries. Well, consumption patterns underwent a sea change due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Well, many industries that have not been noticed or developed earlier started to see steady growth. Our reporter Olivia He finds out what's making these businesses tick. Take a look.
It's 8 p.m. now and I'm here.
In January, around
is that the country will no longer chase.
Shanghai will provide relief packages.
Innovation is the certainty in an uncertain world.
Click into a live stream session to exercise, watch a J-Cho concert on social media platforms, and even visit museums online. In the last few years, especially during the height of the pandemic, digital businesses have thrived. Demand for intelligent consumption on online platforms has been constantly going up.
After the COVID-19 pandemic, I no longer go to the gym, but I prefer to work out by watching live streams at home. Though it is okay to go out now, I'm more inclined to use e-commerce, contact-free delivery, and other online services.
Consumers have now gotten used to enjoying services such as catering, housekeeping, and entertainment without leaving their homes throughout the pandemic. A new business model called lazy economy has emerged in many consumer industries. It offers more convenience and jobs for people.
The rapid growth of food delivery services has been a boon for people like me with limited education.
Many young people are busy with work and travel frequently. I help them take care of their cats and sometimes walk dogs too.
In addition to shopping and working out at home, a lot of people started to plant vegetables in their own balconies during the pandemic period. Many vloggers also shared their experience of planting vegetables on social media platforms and gained a lot of attention. According to data from Taobao's 2022 Balcony Vegetable Planting Report, the number of buyers of various vegetable seeds on Taobao and Tmall platforms increased by more than 100% for 3 consecutive years.
During the pandemic, I grew my own vegetables and fruits on the balcony of my home, and sometimes I gave them to my neighbors. To save space in the balcony, I bought many supporting equipment, such as multifunctional planting basins, planting racks, and some intelligent vegetable planting machines.
In addition to producing ingredients for food, the taste and efficiency of getting to food is just as important. That was why many companies took the opportunity during the pandemic to launch a variety of pre-made dishes. According to the Chinese Ministry of Commerce, during the Spring Festival online shopping event last year, sales of pre-made dishes on Taobao rose 100%, and those on Hema increased by nearly 350%. In light of new opportunities, traditional catering companies have also made their own moves.
As the catering industry was facing a very difficult situation, it was all the more reason why we needed to innovate, research, and develop products to provide good experiences for consumers and find new growth points for the catering industry.
Most of the new economy industries which have sprung up during the pandemic are not only unlocking the entrepreneurial skills of people, but also providing new impetus for economic recovery. Olivia He, CGTN, Beijing.
And in other headlines from China that we are tracking at this hour, the China Sourcing Summit 2023, which is the 12th annual exhibition dedicated to Chinese subcontracting services, is currently underway in the city of Wuhan, Hubei province. The theme of the three-day summit, which ends Thursday, is New Opportunities and Future of Outsourcing Services through Digitization. A large number of new products, techniques, and research results are on display. Microcredit amounting to some 93 billion yuan or $14 billion was dispersed for poverty alleviation in China in 2022. That number is up 24% on a yearly basis, according to data from the China Banking and Insurance Regulatory Commission. And the total number of China-Europe freight train trips passing through the Alatoa Pass in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region surpassed 30,000 as of March 21st this year. And these trains cumulatively carried goods equivalent to 1.35 million 20-foot equivalent units. Well, in 2017, an ambitious plan was implemented with the establishment of the Xiong'an area to restore the former glory and environment of the Baiyangdian wetland, known as the kidney of North China. Well, 6 years later, our reporter Ning Hong is there to see the results.
Once the largest freshwater lake and wetland in North China, years of pollution and drought had nearly dried up Baiyangdian. Now, after 6 years of treatment, Baiyangdian has regained its picturesque scenery.
Our goal is to protect and restore the environment of Baiyangdian, mainly through three aspects: controlling the water quality entering Baiyangdian, reducing pollution sources in the water, and ecological water replenishment, introducing more and better quality water sources.
The Xiong'an area was established in 2017, and the protection of the ecological environment was a key factor in urban planning. In recent years, the local Ecological Environment Bureau, together with departments such as water conservation and agriculture, has taken a series of actions to restore the water quality, environment, and ecology of Baiyangdian.
The ecological environment and water quality of Baiyangdian have undergone a fundamental change, and the water quality has been upgraded from the level 5 to level 3. With the improvement of the ecological environment, biodiversity has also significantly increased. According to our observation records, the number of wild bird species has reached 252, an increase of 46 species compared to before the establishment of the Xiong'an area. The number of fish species has also increased to 46, an increase of 19 species compared to before.
In the north of Baiyangdian, a new city is under construction. It's designed to be a green, ecological, and livable city. The water area of Baiyangdian expanding with an average depth of 6 to 7 meters. And nearby groundwater has also significantly improved. Ning Hong, CGTN, Hubei Province.
And that's going to do it for this edition of Global Business here on CGTN. I'm Michael Wong here in Beijing. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again next time.